Hey guys, this is Benji. Just wanted to reach out to you all. We're taking advantage of this Facebook Live reality to share our heart regarding things that just come up throughout the course of our work. As I've been traveling around and meeting with different people in different communities, all related to this work of abolition and anti-trafficking, there's some things I've been picking up on that I wanted to speak into. First of all, I'm just so excited to see how the anti-trafficking movement is growing, how awareness is spreading, how people's interest in this subject matter has been growing, and so many more people getting involved, more organizations starting. I think that's such a healthy indication of a movement that's taking shape that can powerfully confront the rise of human trafficking in our world. So thanks everyone who's been getting involved, who's been tracking with us, and who's doing things out there. I wanted to speak into some of my personal journey into this and how it relates to some of what I'm seeing happen. When I first found out about trafficking, the most important thing for me at that point was resolving in my heart that I'm not going to turn a blind eye to this injustice. And that led me into a season of digging deep into really understanding the complexity of the issues, what was happening related to this world of trafficking. I actually spent the next 4 years both studying all kinds of resources online or books or movies or things of that nature, as well as traveling to other places to hear, to listen, to learn. And it was through those years of learning that I began to form and shape a response to this injustice. Some of what I'm running into out there are situations where I think there may be an overemphasis on the activity of doing something. And as much as I appreciate that notion, I think that a lot of what I'm seeing and feeling is this notion that one's sincerity regarding the issue of human trafficking is qualified by the need to quickly do something. And so I often hear this language of, what can I do? And it's just almost robotic, and I hear it so much, and I know it comes from a good heart and a good place, but what I'm seeing is a lot of people are kind of rushing out to quote unquote do something to somehow validate the sincerity of their interest and their outrage against human trafficking. And like I said, while I appreciate that, I think that there's something big that's missing in this whole equation here, and that is the process of education, the process of actually educating oneself on the deeper issues, the deeper complexities of this issue. And so I often find myself in conversations with people who are in the anti-trafficking movement, who oftentimes have been in it for some period of time, where I'm being told things like stories where, this person in prostitution is empowered, or this person in prostitution is, what was the term that somebody said recently to me, is being well taken care of. And notions like this that are an indication to me that there may be a really good emphasis on wanting to do something, and I appreciate that, but a gap and a disparity in terms of deepening one's own personal level of education about this issue. And so I really want to encourage us as those responding to this issue, as those who've been awakened to this issue, to give place for the process of educating oneself, to value that process of education, not just going out and doing something, but going to the places where you can find resources to get a deeper understanding and a deeper education of all the issues involved, so that our responses are wrought and birthed from a place of our own maturation, the process of maturity. You know, what I liken it to is like somebody who finds out about Jesus today, you know, and has a powerful conversion experience, and tomorrow they decide they're going to go be a preacher or start a church or become a pastor. And what would be missing in that equation, while the notion is good, is the process of education, the process of time taken to go in to study theology, scripture, to educate oneself, and then to do that over the course of a period of time where there are life circumstances that are happening and there are other things going on, and the process of having to flesh those out with others. And I feel like in some ways the anti-trafficking movement has been stunted in its growth, in the development of its maturity. In many respects, when I go out, as encouraged as I am by people rising up to respond to these issues, I'm also acknowledging a lack of maturity in the anti-trafficking movement. The very fact that many of us still are fixated on this idea of starting a home for children, as opposed to, for example, understanding the systemic situation that got the person in that child in that situation in the first place, or realizing that that child there are many of those children who became adults and they still need housing. And so I'm all for children's homes, and I'm not, you know, if that's your particular calling, I think that's great, and I would say go for it. But even among the donor community, even among aspects of the anti-trafficking community, there's like, we value certain things that are very narrow within this larger issue, and don't value many of the overarching complexities of the problem, some of the deeper root issues at work. And so, you know, it would have been like in the days of slavery, you know, for example, to say, man, I'm gonna create a home for the children who are being beaten and abused in the cotton fields, you know, but we're gonna leave everybody else out there, and we're gonna forget about the systemic injustice system of slavery that put that child there in the first place. It's like, no, all of that is really important. And so I think that we have to begin to give ourselves to a deeper education of the complexities of this issue, so that the responses that we're forming are from a place of maturity, a place of understanding, a place of clarity that sees all the moving parts and pictures. And I know that there are many, many mature people in this movement, and there are many great things that are happening, but I'm just speaking to some of the situations and experiences that I've had. And so what I want to say is that there are so many resources out there. Oftentimes when I talk to people, they haven't tapped into any of them. You know, so seeing taken is not, you know, that's not where the education ends. That's where the education begins. And so Melissa Farley, for example, has a website called Prostitution Research, which most people that I know have not ever even been on that site. When it's an absolute gold mine, it's a treasure trove of over 20 years of peer-reviewed research from one of the leading experts in this field on this whole subject matter, who has written extensively, who has researched extensively, who has spoken with survivors and people still in exploited positions literally for decades. So the fact that we're in the anti-trafficking movement, that we're working hard to do something, and many of us don't even know about that website, is problematic. And I would suggest that we get to know about that website and other resources like that. Melissa Farley, her research, is such an amazing gift to this whole movement. So I want to encourage us, go to that website, start reading. I mean, it would take months to read through all that's there, but start the journey. Pick it out an article today. She's one of the few out there who really have what I would consider to be one of the most accurate perspectives regarding this whole issue. There are books out there. Do you know about Paid For by Rachel Moran? Have you read it? It's the most important. Catherine McKinnon, a scholar at Harvard University, said it is the most important book ever written on prostitution. So we're fighting human trafficking, but we've never even read, you know, one of the most important resources ever created on the larger system of which people are trafficked in. And so I want you to hear my heart in this. I think that's okay. that we haven't read it all or studied it all. That's okay. We can still be investing in this issue, but we've got to start. We've got to start educating ourselves. We have to give value and place for that process of education. We have to learn and dig deeper into these issues. Because honestly, I don't want to sit with people in this movement and have them tell me about how situations where prostitution is empowering. I want you to have done the education. I want you to have taken the time and the investment to educate yourself so that you understand what a destructive statement that is to suggest that there's a situation where prostitution is empowering. What we know based on all of this research is that prostitution is not empowering, that it's a system of oppression, violence, and exploitation, regardless of how somebody got into that situation. We know that to actually even exist in prostitution, one has to betray themselves. Whether it's indoor or outdoor prostitution, they have to betray themselves from the standpoint that they have to pretend like they're enjoying this thing, being with this guy, being with this strange figure, doing the things that he's asking them to do with them, regardless of how they got into it, that at a heart level does not desire. So it's a betrayal of the self. We know so many things about prostitution that have been well documented, well researched, well spoken about, but many of us in the anti-trafficking movement are still ignorant of those things. And so I want to just challenge us. I want to encourage us to begin to get a hold of these resources, paid for by Rachel Moran. You can get on the Exodus Cry website, or I'm sure many other places. Melissa Farley's website, prostitutionresearch.com. For those of us in the anti-trafficking movement, have you donated to prostitutionresearchandeducation.com? Have you considered the massive contribution that Melissa Farley has made to this movement, and that have allowed films like Nefarious to be made, that have allowed books to be written and where that research can be cited, have allowed cases to be taken on where that research can be brought to the forefront? Have we donated to her? Have we even considered how valuable her contribution has been? Or do we only value donating to Homes for Children? You see, and so I'm so passionate about Homes for Children and so passionate about giving to those contexts, but we've devalued all these other things at the expense of seeing, well, no, it's about this one thing. So my challenge to us, beloved, is to give ourselves to a place of education. Commit yourself, whether it be 3 months, whether it be a year, whether it be, my initial immersion was a 4-year immersion to learn, to listen, to understand. And I'm not trying to present myself as the hero of the story or say, how great I am, but I really wanted to learn, and I understand today that many of the choices that I make, many of the things that I'm doing today were informed by that season of research. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not gone through that season. So I'm just highlighting a few resources. There's documentaries, there's narrative films. I mean, I talk to people all the time. I mentioned the movie The Whistleblower, which is about a true story about trafficking happening in Eastern Europe, and where people never even heard of the movie. And it's the best narrative film ever made on trafficking. And so, it's things like that where it's just like, whether, when we know Taken, but movies, documentaries, articles, there's research on Exodus Cry website, blogs, podcasts, books. Begin to sink your teeth into this stuff. It's not a side issue. These things are not, it's not like, well, I'm going to go do something, and like maybe when I get around to it, I'll actually learn about the thing that I'm doing something for. Like, no, we need to educate ourselves and let our responses be birthed out of that place. And so my hope is that in talking with people, I begin to hear more about, I've been researching these things, and here's now what I feel I'm supposed to do, as opposed to, tell me what to do, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. I think, again, that's great that people's hearts are moved, that we're thinking and saying, I've got to do something about this. I think that's awesome. Let that be translated into one of the most valuable things that I can do right now, and for the next number of months, is to read, study, learn, educate. I think if you do that, that you will come out of that season with a much fresher perspective and clearer insight into what responding to this issue looks like in your own personal life. Because I can't tell everybody what to do. There are certain things out there that are obvious, but You know, everybody's different. Everybody has a different calling. Everybody has a different educational background. Everybody has a different future and desires and passions in front of them. And those things, your path into this, I think, will be shaped largely by a process of research, a process of education that begins to connect the dots between who you are and this issue in a way that you learn how to respond. My other hope is that the anti-trafficking movement will grow to a place of maturity. We will stop the insanity of trying to divide trafficking from prostitution, trafficking from the commercial sex industry, and that we will start to see the similarities between these things and the way that the larger system operates as a system of entire system of exploitation, instead of constantly trying to divide in and out worthy versus unworthy victim. And this is for the movement. I hope the movement and all of those who are supporting this movement will reach that place of maturity. And I think that's going to happen through investing time into learning about this. So much deception is being spread out there right now. Articles coming out in the New York Times, I've even seen by Christian theologians, coming out through people like Amnesty International, so much deception from the pro-sex work movement about how to understand prostitution that is deluding the masses, including people in the anti-trafficking movement. Beloved, we cannot let that happen. We need the resources that are coming out by people like survivor organizations like SPACE, books like Paid For by Rachel Moran, research that has been done by Melissa Farley, and by God, the most important is the survivor movement. We have to listen to survivors. We have to listen to the things that they're telling us and how to understand this issue. There was an article written called "Why the Human Trafficking Movement Ignores the Voice of Sex Workers." It's one of the most deplorable articles I've ever read. But basically the premise of it is highlighting how the anti-trafficking movement needs to listen to quote-unquote sex workers as though there exists such a thing. And what he's referring to is the people who are being paid to parrot a certain notion of prostitution promoted by this pro-prostitution movement, which is rooted in absolute deception, absolute lies. Who we actually need to be listening to are survivors, the people who have come out of these exploited positions, who can now objectively speak about it. And for those who are doing that, we need to pay them. We need to, when they come and speak at our conferences, when we ask them to come to our meetings, we actually need to value them. We need to pay them. We need to listen and hear what they're saying. Their perspective is so important. So can I encourage us as an anti-trafficking movement to give ourselves to becoming more educated, hearing what the survivor movement is saying, hearing what the researchers like Melissa Farley are saying, listening to survivor organizations like SPACE, run by Rachel Moran, reading the books that have been written that truly, I mean, you think about what it requires for a survivor to speak about their experience. It's incredibly courageous and humbling, because so many of those experiences are so deeply humiliating. When I read through Rachel Moran's book, I was just stunned and in awe of the things that she shared about, and gained such a reverence for her voice, for her perspective. So I want to encourage us to do that. Let's give ourselves, let's begin to value education, research, let's begin to pour ourselves into it, and let's become mature as an anti-trafficking movement. So whether you're called to start a children's home, an awareness movement, do a movie, whatever you're called to do, that you'll have a healthy, big picture perspective, a deep understanding, and be able to converse about this issue in really meaningful, helpful, and productive ways. Thanks, guys. I know this is a bit of a brain dump and kind of a heavy charge, and I love you all, and I speak this out of a place of love, and I just have a passion to see this movement grow into what it can become, and so I hope you hear my heart in that, yeah, thanks for letting me get that off my chest. We'll talk again soon.